All right.
How do we,
I think it works.
oh, it's just on.
Yeah.
How are you? Good morning. We're going to get started in just a minute. This is the DNS bundled BOF. We're going to start with the blue sheets here. Let me put them down here on the ends of the tables.
When I recap the barbell, need I stand
In the pink box. Well, I guess we don't actually
Okay.
we don't actually have meet echo going on, so I probably don't have to.
Okay.
But
It's better.
yeah, since
Thank
we
you.
didn't, I don't know if they. Let me ask.
Mhm.
So I don't see our AD in the room offhand, but I have an interesting question. I know this room is set up for Meet Echo. Is it? We didn't ask for it, but did you? Is Meet Echo set up for this room? Oh, it is there. Okay, so we need to make sure we stand in the pink box. So that answers that question.
There are also a bunch of people on Meet Echo, including Stephen Farrell.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, it's actually after 9:30 in the morning here, so I guess we should get started. So thank you very much. This is the DNS bundled BOF, not draft. We're going to have a draft when we're done, right? That's right, nod your heads. So thank you very much for coming. I guess we'll just jump right in here. So the obvious note, okay, you have the right to remain silent, and if you're not silent, then anything you say can and will be used against you within the IETF. So please keep that in mind whenever you're talking and anything you might write into Jabber. So the blue sheets have already been started. So make sure that you sign the blue sheets. As we all well understand, they help the Secretariat to be nice to us, and we like that. We do already have note takers. So Shane, I saw you walk by and check in. Lin, you are here somewhere? Raise your hand. Oh, she's in the back. All right, awesome. So we have our note takers all set up and the Jabber scribes, Stephane and John. Yes, he's right by the microphone. Excellent. Oh, and he's right next to the other Jabber scribe. So good deal. Jean Kang. Okay, so our agenda, we're going through some introductions. Ning Kang, my co-chair here. Oh, I'm Jim Galvin, by the way. I guess that's the other obvious thing. You're supposed to announce yourself when you start these meetings. Ning Kang will give a summary and introduction of a BOF that we had back in Berlin when we started all of this discussion. We'll jump right in with a problem statement. John Levine has kindly agreed to give some discussion about where a draft statement as to where we are. And then we have some use cases to talk about. And then, as is expected from a BOF in general, we will have some open discussion to see what the community thinks, since that's obviously the most important part of all of this. So first question is, anyone have any issues with the agenda? Anyone want to add or remove from that? Any discussion? Okay, then let's jump right in. And Ning, over to you. You can stand in the known pink box there and get us started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ning. I want to first brief recap what we do during the Berlin BOF. And about 20 people attend the BOF, and most people works on the domain industry. And during the discussion, almost everyone think this topic is interesting and they have interest. But people also think that the bundled domain name may be maybe is a very, very broad, complicated problem, and it may be related with different layers, and not only DNS layer, but also the provisioning, the registration layer, and also the application layer. So we got rough consensus of this BABOF that we need to work on the problem statement draft first, and then think about the BOF. And we need to make clear about what the problem we want to solve and what is the use case. So, and during this BABOF, there are a few people show his hands, want to contribute to the problem statement. And then after the BABOF, we did it. We make a document and we make some discussion about this problem. And then we got Bob here today. So I'm glad to see lots of people here to talk with this topic. And I hope that today we can just focus on the problem. I do know that domain name bundled, for example, the IDM variance is a very complicated problem and maybe a swamp. So I don't want everybody go with us to jump into the swamp. So this time we just try to narrow the problem and try to make some clear problem and try to see what we can solve this time. So that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And so we'll move right into John. Do you want to come up here and we'll go through the problem statement?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I know. Oh. It's only been 50 years. Soon we will learn to understand software.
Okay.
Good. All right. So I'm going to give. Yeah, I can't help if you're all shorter than me. Thank you. I think you're a quarter of a centimeter shorter than me, but we need to resolve this over beer. Anyway, I'm going to give a short problem statement. There's a lot of slides here that allude to other things we're going to cover, and I'm also going to briefly go across some of the proposed technical approaches. Although our goal here is not to pick a technical approach; it's to decide whether we have a problem we can solve. Next, please. So here's basically the problem. I mean, we want names to work the same for some definition of same that we don't understand. Right, the same can means different things to everybody. Next, please. So at the previous BARBOFs, we seem to have agreed that these are things that we are and are not willing to consider. We're willing to handle modest numbers of groups of names. I mean, that is, we're willing, for example, a name written entirely in traditional Chinese versus and the equivalent name written in simplified Chinese. Okay, what's out is handling huge groups of names of the M to the N variety, where we have every combinational variation, for example, of a name that has accented characters, and you want to handle every possible version with and without accents. If we could handle that, that would be nice, but it's probably hard, so we're not going to think about it. Next, please. So here are some scenarios. I'm going to go over these really quickly because immediately after me, people will talk about these in more detail. Next, please. So at second level domain variants, the best known example is traditional and simplified Chinese. In many languages written in Roman letters, you want to bundle together accented and unaccented version of the characters like they do in .cat. In Greek, there is this peculiar linguistic nit that if you have a name that ends in a sigma and is masculine, then the capitalized version is just written with the letters, where you can see Nikos in capital letters in the middle. whereas in the lowercase version, you put a thing called a tonos, which looks like an accent over the vowel, except that since people use lousy keyboards, they also wanted to recognize the tono, the same name without the tonos. Okay, and this is the example of the sort of thing that, you know, to anybody, I don't speak Greek, but my understanding is to anybody who speaks Greek, this seems totally obvious. And there are situations like this in natural languages all over the planet. And there are a variety of ways to implement it. I mean, Greek has attempted, the .gr has attempted to do this with D names that work poorly for reasons that will become obvious. .cat used to, but they don't anymore. Next, please. And so here are, Taiwan dealt with TLD variants. There's a simplified and a traditional version of the name of Taiwan. They do it with a D name. They actually have a D name in their zone file that makes the simplified version is a D name pointing at the traditional version, and this works somewhat. Next, please. This is the simplified and traditional version of the name of China in Chinese. In this case, they use the same name servers, and by policy, the zones served up by the name servers are supposed to be the same, again, for some definition of the same. .ngo and ONG, which are new domains intended for nonprofits. Also, they have the same name servers. When you register one, you get the other, and the name servers point to the same place. But there's no policy saying whether they're supposed to resolve the same or not. And I, in fact, have gone through .ngo and .ong, and I would say maybe a third of them resolve pretty much the same, and the rest of them, in practice, the registrant picked whichever acronym makes sense in the language they speak, and the other one is sort of random. Next, please. And another place where people want to make something equivalent is that they just got different names. You know, you got your same name registered in .com or .net, or you want to register names that are linguistically equivalent in your language, and it's kind of, you know, and if you do that, it's up to you to make it work. And at this point, generally, it doesn't. Next, please. This is the combination. Even if you try to stay away from the combinational explosion, it bites you anyway. So, for example, if you have the name baz.bar.foo in your TLD, and each of those names has one X, foo has two accented vowels, baz and bar each have one accented vowel, and just doing the simplest with and without accents at each level, you've already exploded to 16 names at the third level that are supposed to be the same, you know, and given the obvious way to provision this would make your zone file explode, and we probably don't want that to happen. Next, please. And finally, there's the application problem, which is even if your DNS is set up right, and the names have equivalent A records or MX records or quad A records, they're going to point at a web server or a mail server, which also has to be configured, so that, you know, if you have foo.biz with and without accents, and the web server for one understands one but doesn't understand the other, it doesn't work. And I did some surveys of .cat back when they were using D names, and I think of the 100 names, I looked at, you know, www.accentedname.cat versus unaccentedname.cat, and I think I looked at a lot of names, and I think I only found one where the two names actually both worked in a similar way. In other places, you know, it failed. You know, I got the thing that says, you know, welcome to Apache, now configure your website. It was bad. And you run into the same problems with email. You can point the stuff at the mail server, but if the mail server isn't configured to handle the domains, it's going to say relaying denied. If you have anything that uses SRV, like SIP, same thing. You can point the names at it, but if the server isn't prepared to handle the domain names, it doesn't work. So one of the questions I would like to think about is it possible to automatically configure domains, to automatically configure applications to handle the domains pointed at them in a way that is workable and adequately secure? Next, please. So yeah, here are the three approaches. And again, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because people are going to talk about them in more detail these are in more detail in the next couple of pitches. Next, please. So parallel DNS, like they do in China and .ong, it depends on the DNS manager to keep the zones in sync, but in fact, they don't. And we have plenty of experience with this. Like I just said with .cat, in principle, it's supposed to be the same. Actually, in NGO and ONG, it's supposed to be the same. Actually, it isn't. Next, please. You say, oh, I can simply put a CNAME at every name in my secondary in my copy zone, which points at the names in the first zone, which is pretty much pessimal. It has all the problems of parallel NS because you actually have two zones to keep in sync, and then it has all the problems with CNAMEs, like you're not allowed to have a male MX record point at a CNAME. You're not allowed to have an NS record in a delegated zone point at a CNAME. And the security problem is that anybody can point a CNAME at anybody else. So I really do not want to set up my web server or my mail server to automatically respond to any name that somebody happens to point at me as a CNAME. That's a horrible security problem. Next, please. The other approach is DNAMEs. DNAMEs work kind of okay for Taiwan because the DNAME is actually at the TLD. So at the second level, the DNAME actually shadows everything. Didn't work in CAT because if you had foo.cat, the DNAME would be at foo.cat. So www.foo.cat would have multiple versions, but the actual second level domain wouldn't. So nobody's mail would work. And again, it has all the CNAME problems, and it also has the no control over who points names at you problem. Next, please. So here are three proposed solutions, and again, I'm going to go through these quickly, but we are not here to pick any or all of these. Next, please. BNAME is essentially CNAME plus DNAME. It's like a DNAME, except it also redirects the top level name. It has a variety of implementation and semantic problems that are well known to anybody who's followed this discussion. So I won't describe them further here. Next, please. Doug Barton suggested clone some years ago, which is sort of the reverse of BNAME. Rather than saying this name points at that name, clone says, here is in my zone says, here's all the other names that I also want to handle. So somehow it synthesizes parallel zones for your name. And he had a way that you can send the clone then signals caches so they can synthesize stuff and limit the traffic. This avoids the CNAME control problem because now I am saying what names are substitutable for me, rather than other people simply saying simply pointing names at me. And one more. And then Ted Hardy sent out something called arc pointers, which was originally intended for things like .onion. It's basically it's a protocol switch that you can send stuff off to some other piece of code that decides what to do, and what the piece of code could do is simply say, okay, go back and do a DNS lookup on this other name. And Ted just did this last week, and his draft described some of the pros and cons that he was thinking about. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, then there's the application issues. You know, can web and mail servers automatically configure? It's obvious how they would. If they see a mystery name pointed at them, they go back and say, oh, there's a clone record for this domain, so actually it's the same as that other name that I understand. Is this a good idea? Maybe, maybe not. It's got the security issues from CNAME. It's also like TLS problems. You know, how am I going to configure how am I going to set up my TLS certificates so that it does the right thing with names that are configured at it on the fly? And I know just enough about TLS to know that I have no idea what the answer to this question is. Next, please. And that's it. So we had a problem.
Okay. And at the microphone. So Paul, quickly, just clarify.
Paul Hoffman, you didn't list one that I saw. I don't think I saw it on this mailing list, but the don't do anything in the protocol, but add something to the master file to make it easy so that when the authoritative server is loading up the master file, that it knows to be able to respond to these other things. And I'm sorry, I forget the name. That was, I think, from Paul Vixie.
That's pretty close to what clone does. You know, clone says this
the
is
clone's an RR type, and this was actually a macro.
Well,
so I mean, so I think clone is on the wire, and this other proposal had no wire changes. It was essentially a way to tell. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have the pointer to it.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly done macros that.
Right, but I mean, I'm just saying that was you didn't list that as one of the proposals, which is no on the wire changes, but make it easier for authoritative servers.
Yeah, clone basically does that both in the server and on the wire. So this would just be in the server.
Correct. There was one that was just in the server, no on the wire changes.
I'm not omniscient. You know that.
Andre?
So Andre, John, I have your security case when we talk at the dinner. When looking in the problem space, you absolutely must avoid anything that will cause a DNS lookup on connection. So that's the CNAME, DNAME, BNAME problem, that if you do the online lookups where the connection is made and the hostname is passed, then you can easily DDoS the server, because even the logs are usually parsed afterwards for the reverse records. So you must absolutely avoid any DNS lookup. So or they must be cached, and then you can overflow the cache and cause other sort of problem. So when I know that we are mostly looking at the problem solution, but we must really really avoid any solution that would cause any DNS lookup at the connection time to the server. So if I set up a bname, dname, cname to an end server without the consent of the domain holder, then it must not resolve, never ever.
I take your point for the web. For mail, you're completely wrong. We do dozens of lookups at connection time, and we just deal with it. So I think this is, I think this is something, certainly something to keep in mind.
Well, mostly for web, yes, because the volume is much higher there.
Yeah,
but even for mail, you can sort of overflow all kind of stuff if you cause the lookups, because you can point the wildcards to it and then ask for random names and stuff like that. And
you certainly can. But this, I mean, I'm saying certainly in the mail world, like these are problems that we've been dealing with for a decade. So there's certainly problems we should think about. I wouldn't immediately say that they're blocking problems. Okay.
Ray, in the back, just a clarifying question, yes?
Just not a question, observation. I know there's been a working group set up to look at this already, probably failed, but it's not just the server side that's got to know about the equivalence of the names, it's the client side as well, because of the origin problem, same origin.
Oh.
The same origin problem.
Yeah, that's kind of the, well, that's sort of all the application stuff I was talking about. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's the client-side applications as well as the server-side applications. And I think you concentrated, I think, in the slides on the server-side applications.
Yeah, I think I'm implicitly assuming that any DNS magic you can do on the server to figure out whether things are substitutable, you can also do on the client. But of course, as Andre said, maybe that has performance problems.
Indeed.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move into, now that we've had a description of the problem statement and why we care about this, we'll move into some actual use cases, folks who want to use this. And John Kong Yao is up first. Oh, sorry.
My name is Jiankang Yao from Cynica. I like, next slide. Next. So for on our .cn registry, we currently have more than 2 million Chinese domain names. For example, when you register a Chinese Cynica.cn, we will give two versions, simpler version and a traditional version. This is who is using info. So these two version names is bundled together. Simplified version and the traditional version. So all bundle Chinese domain names and .cn are configured to have same NS records and are supposed to have the same DNS resolution. Then you may ask why. Because the Chinese character, the pronunciation is same. When I told someone my company's Chinese domain name is Chinese Cynica.cn, someone may input a simplified version of Chinese email address. Someone may put a traditional Chinese email, Chinese domain names. So when heard the Chinese Cynica.cn, someone put a different version of Chinese domain names. So they hope to get the same DNS resolution. So if they, but in current practice, because we have no good DNS tool to manage this bundling in DNS resolution. So some registrant or users just configure one configure one version of Chinese domain names. So the other version of Chinese domain is not reachable or cannot resolvable in DNS. So someone say, oh, Chinese domain name or DNS line. So for Cynic or some registry, so we have a potential around 2 million complaints about CDN usage, Chinese domain name usage or IDN usage. Say they want to get the same DNS resolution result, but many Chinese domain names cannot reachable in DS. We cannot get a good resolution. So some registrants and users hope some IETF to do something, help them to get invent a DNS patch or a tool to help them to get a DNS bundling domain name to get same DNS resolution result. So this is the same case. Next. So this .c is maybe from east. So we also have from west. Greece, because my Greece friends cannot attend this meeting, so they give some material to me. So in Greece, there are all Greece male names and final sigma. So about 30% of Greece IDN domain names, they have warrant issues. So they will normally have 3 domain names bundled together. They use DNAME to bundle them together, but there's a problem. So the person said, as you understand, it would be perfect for the user if it could be possible with one DNS entry to have all these up and running. However, with today's solution, this is not an option. We have asked in the past for Unify in the top level to deal with such mappings, but it was rejected from the certain members of the technical community as not available. So I am happy to see your effort moving along and hope there is a way to overcome certain difficulties that may appear in the way. So so I think from the west, from the east, we all from the registry, from the user, from the registrant, and we all like have some DNS patch to help the bundling domain names to have the same DNS resolution result. This is the DOC and GR cases. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to the next use case from Taiwan. Nawen.
Morning, this is Nawen Xu from TDynamic. Next slide. Thank you. TDynamic is the registry of TWCCTLD and the Taiwan IDN-CCTLD in traditional and simplified version. We have a policy is that register we are bundle the IDN.TW and the IDN.Taiwan, most in traditional and simplified Chinese. So you can check the domain name in Push server. You will output the whole bundle domain name in the same page. And the IDN.Taiwan we are dedicated in IDN-CCTLD fast track. And the fast track requirement is that the two variant TLD must have the same destination. So at that time we have not the ideal solution to implement the same destination. Until now, we still have not the ideal solution. So we use the DNAME to implement the same destination. Okay, you can see the DNS query. The response there are 2 DNAME here. One is the for TLD, and the second one is for second level. Because our second level both have traditional and simplified. We are bundled together. Next page. This is our solution. I can dedicate 2 IDN variant TLD to TDynamic, and the left side is simplified Chinese, the right side is the traditional Chinese. In the simplified Chinese, we just put a DNAME record in the ROM. So it's an empty ROM. And the right hand side, the traditional Chinese, we have the traditional domain name dedicated to a restaurant, but the simplified domain name was just a DNAM point to the traditional Chinese. So when the cache DNS server query the simplified domain name, you will the TOD will respond to the DNAM, and the traditional Chinese .Taiwan they will respond to the DNAM second level DNAM to the cache server. It's a little bit overhead because the DNS must query two times. So our implementation is put the two zone in the same server. So the DNS response can what in one message response message return with two DNAM in the same message. Next slide. Okay. There is still some issue. Okay, the problem is the restaurant only handle one DOM, especially in Taiwan user, because in Taiwan IME the information only support the traditional Chinese input by default. Although we can read and write the simplified Chinese, but the computer must special configuration to input the simplified Chinese. So it's very convenient for Taiwan user. They handle their domain name. And but later comes the DNAM is usually is the owner name. The DNAM itself cannot redirect to the CNAME. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Andre?
Hi, I'm Andre from CZNIC, and I couldn't sleep last night, so I know I watched The Walking Dead, so I apologize if I sound like a zombie. So for .cz, I think that actually the problem that .cz has is common to all Latin, to all scripts that use Latin extended, because many Czech word contains characters with well, acute, Karen, and Brink, and but the usual mapping for BUs in Czech Republic is just we strip the diacritics and be done with that, and all understand that. But the word can change meaning. There are several variants. I have few examples, like Vláda is government, but Vláďa is a male name, and I'm quite sure I didn't think of anything more sophisticated, but well, Nic, which is actually our company name, she said nothing, is nothing, and Nic is imperative of destroy. So stripping the diacritics from the name will change the meaning. So you usually need a context if the people write without diacritics to understand what they are trying to say, because it might not make a sense. And I think this is common to not only Roman languages, John, but also to Slavic languages, which doesn't use Azbuka. So we all share the same problem. I don't know about the other languages, how did it change the meaning, but I'm guessing that would be similar. Next slide, please. So, but is this really a script problem or naming problem? Again, I think all languages have synonyms. So we have like 3 names to name a boy. And are they the same from the domain perspective? No. Are they the same from the language perspective? Well, mostly. Again, dashes in the names. Usually you just defensively register all the variants with the dashes, without dashes, like crazy. So for my wife's eShop, I have like 9 domains just to be sure that nobody can register them. But frankly, I don't really care if they resolve or not. I just want not anybody else to not have them. And again, brands like IETF or, as I say, Bearded Kindergarten. But the big companies have different brands, and they, well, either have different TLD or stuff like that. So I'm not really sure this is a script problem or a more general like language problem or human problem. So that's all for me.
Okay, thank you, Andre. And we have, GoDaddy. Okay, yes.
First off, thank you for raising the microphone for me. I appreciate it. So I'm coming here to the IETF. This is my second IETF, and I want to start off by making a comment about nomenclature. You're going to see in the next slide or two the use of the word identity. I've been told I should not use that word when thinking about an online identity like a consumer might use it, because identity means something specific here. Please note, I'm just talking about an individual or a company that wants to be found online using this to identify themselves. So, next slide. So the use case that I have is less about DNS and more about the original barb-off that we had, where we got together and started talking about the solution that would have a level of sameness to names or to DNS entries. And the uses that we see at the registrar level in providing online presences for folks is that it transcends sameness or that level of similarity. People they have multidimensional identities online where they may have restaurants. They may have a restaurant, they may have menu that they want people to find. They may have restaurants throughout Asia, in Japan, specifically in Tokyo, Yokohama, etc. And right now you can either prepend a DNS label for each one of these, or a lot of folks will do a / destination for their application of the individual place online. With the new GTLD program rolling out and so many more options, and even with CCTLDs, the use of extensions to provide a level of specificity is being more commonly desired. We'd like to enable people to use multiple domain names to get to represent a single, what I call identity, as opposed to having to use a single domain name to accomplish that. So John, I didn't realize John was going to do such an excellent job of describing the problem space, because when we got together originally back in Berlin, it was all about what resource records we might be creating, et cetera. But I didn't see that we were really talking about the whole vertical problem, where even if you get two different DNS labels to resolve the same, you're not going to be able to necessarily use it through the entire provisioning stack for the web presence. So just the idea is that there's probably work to be done in EPP with registries and registrars. Registrars and DNS management companies are going to need to identify these multifaceted identities and treat them as a DNS bundle, or excuse me, not a DNS, as an identity bundle. And then you've got the other rest of the stack that needs to be able to treat them the same, even though they may come through host headers, might need to be handled differently, et cetera. So in the end, I'm going to stop now and turn it over to discussion. I just wanted to make sure from our perspective, it's more than just a technical issue. It's also, we're looking for a solution for consumers so they don't have to worry about the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. And in our agenda, we have one more use case that we want to add here. We have some folks from .in, and Haresh in particular. He has given us some slides, and he's going to quickly come on up here to the pink box so our remote participants can see you. I'm going to walk quickly in a couple of minutes here through some use cases in .in, please.
Okay, so Harish Chaudhary from .in, and for us, the use case could be like this. So that is Harish.in for me is my Sky name, and in India we have 22 languages. So if I could write my name in 22 languages, and so there are one English and 22 other languages representing the same name. So that is how we hope that if it could be mapped at the DNS level to my Harish.in, I mean, so that it could be easy to manage all those 22 variations. It could be the possibility, it's just the case of my name, but it could be the possibility for a brand or any organization. So in my next slide, so let's see .tata. .tata is one of the big organization in India, and Titan, Indica, Motor, Tanish, they are the different brands. So this could be the I mean, if there are so many different brands for same organization, so it could be managed easily. So that is, and we could take it to tata.com. So that is the two useful use cases, but there are many more because there are several combinations with the new GT program and ID and CCTLDs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And yes, you may ask a question.
Yeah, 22 languages is a lot. I mean, does .in really want to have 22 equivalents for every name in .in, or do you just want to make it possible to have up to 22 depending on what languages the registrant chooses to implement?
So, I mean, it depends. Like, it depends upon the organization. Like, if we have 22, I mean, no. So many organizations could register names in 22 different languages depending upon the geographic location and the language, prevalent. So it's like, I mean, important for them if they could manage it easily, because there are 22 combinations and it's very difficult for them.
Okay, so if it were a small company, they might do one or two, but if it's a big company, if it's a national company, they might well do all 20.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the case. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean.
Hello.
Yes.
One way from ZDNS. Actually, I'm working for the CGP in ICANN IDM project. I'm sorry, one way from ZDNS. Basically, I'm working for the Chinese generation panel in ICANN for the IDM project. I think this bundle, if there's a kind of bundle solution, it will help the not only for ICANN but only for the top level, registries and registers to deploy the DNS resolution, especially for variants. But also, ZDNS is the TOD backend and the manager DNS service provider. So I just wondered, I think this bundle relationship should be kind of a reflection of the requirement from the registrant, the end user. So I just wondered if I see a many, the description of the DNS resolution configuration. I just wonder if EPP protocol or some other, like WHOIS, this will be considered in our BOF. Yes.
So the short answer is yes, and we're about to start general discussion. So we'll see what other folks, if anyone else wants to add something to that. So I was hoping that you were just going to have a clarifying question here for the use cases. But if we pause for a moment here, and we have someone in the in the Meet Echo. I'm wondering why people are pointing at me. I'm like, what did I do? So, okay. So John's there, and please, John, go ahead. Clarifying questions for the moment, or are you in the queue for discussion?
Clarifying question.
Go ahead, please.
I'd like to understand how the Indian example with up to 20 odd names under .in reconciles with the fact that India has applied for and gotten a fairly large number of TLDs corresponding to each of those languages, and whether that eliminates the problem or makes it worse, or creates a situation in which each of the languages and scripts needs to be propagated under each of those TLDs.
Harish, do you have a?
So like, I think it, I mean, easy for the people to manage, because, there are several geographic locations, and based upon the language prevailing, we have the TLDs, but it's when it is very difficult because of several combinations to find out who is who. So that's, I think it'll, it will help to ease the, to tackle all these permutations and combinations. I hope this, answered your question, or should I be?
Well, I think the question that John is asking is, with 22 languages, are we making the problem worse, or given that we already have, 22 or some number of TLDs moving towards 22, is that not really a problem for .in is the question that he's asking. But maybe you're not prepared to answer that question right now.
Yeah, not, but I'll definitely share on my answer. Yeah. Again.
Okay. Blue sheets are coming around. If anyone has not had the blue sheet, please raise your hand and we'll pass that back to you. Okay, so next slide here. So those are the use cases. We're now going to open up the microphones if people want to come up to the microphone. I mean, we have the standard IETF BOF questions here about whether or not we have a real problem that is interesting, and interesting in the sense that it's something the IETF should work on and that there are people who are willing to work on this problem. And of course, we're always interested in other related use cases. We've tried to describe the problem and have a few people explain how they would like a solution to solve a particular version of the problem that they have. Hopefully, our goal here for today is to clearly be able to state what the problem is that we're looking to solve. So moving on to the next slide. So this is where we are in this discussion. We've had some discussions with a number of people here along the way getting to Wednesday morning. And so we have a few answers that we want to put up to help maybe shape our conversation here this morning. But it's important to understand that we are not looking for any changes to the DNS protocol. All right, so any solution that we come up with to the problems that we've been describing should not change anything in the protocol itself, the base protocol. So there's no changes to legacy systems and the infrastructure that exists. Anything that we do going forward, ideally, well, not ideally, we are looking for something to be backward compatible so that, again, no changes. But if we add things, it would only affect those who want to come to the table to deal with the problem space. Of course, we do want to make sure that whatever we come to works with DNSSEC, that it's added and is included here. And finally, our goal here is to be able to have names or labels in the DNS that are substitutable and that they are all in a single context. So we're not trying to create a new context here, not trying to identify a particular label as primary versus the other. This is all about creating things which have the same behavior, regardless of the query that might come in the DNS. So with that as an introduction, we're going to have an open microphone, and we have several people lined up. And so, Andrew, you're at the front mic. We'll go to you first.
Hi, it's Andrew Sullivan here. My understanding is that this is not a working group forming BOF, and therefore I'm a little less concerned about whether any of these things are actually implementable. In particular, I'm a little concerned about the restrictions that you just put on this, which seem to me to restrict this to a set of possible solutions that are really just reproduce all of these names in the DNS, and so it's nothing new. However, I'm actually a little more concerned about the answer to the second question here, because initially, for the first several presentations, it seemed to me that there was nothing new here. And I remember discussions around this that happened in Maastricht. I remember discussions that happened before that. This has been going on for a long time. People keep coming and saying, I just want the two things to be the same. And the answer continues to be, we know that you want that. Pony. The fact is that people have wanted this over and over again, and the basic problem is the problems continue to be intractable for the same reasons that they were intractable the last 5 times we asked about this, so it's not very interesting. But the presentation that Richard made is interesting to me because it changes this game completely. And that is, what it's saying is, I just want a name to work, and I want these different things that people are calling stuff to all work the same way according to various contexts that might be relevant. Like, for instance, this one is relevant in Asia. This is a flattening of the name of the naming conventions of the DNS, which is very different from the other things that we have seen. And so historically, what I thought that people were asking for was to make different trees in the DNS work like one another. So you get to one tree and it turns out that that is the same as other directed graphs within the DNS, and so you find another entry point to another directed graph in the DNS, and everything underneath that follows from that as well. But this case is actually different from that, because what it's saying is, I want this name to work the same as that URI. Well, that is a very different scope from the rest of these things. What that is saying is, I want naming fundamentally not to be anymore a question of directed graphs on the internet, but I just want, naming of individual resources to work sort of conveniently according to what people wanted. If that's the problem we're trying to solve, then what we really start with actually is on the next slide, and one of them is false, and that is the first bullet has to go, because it's must not change the DNS protocol. It's rather must replace the DNS protocol with a completely new naming system for the internet. Now that might be a good idea, but that's a much bigger problem than the already impossible problem of just pointing to new places in the acyclical graph. Oh, and there is one other thing that I will say, and that is we've already tried to do a number of things along these lines in another working group in order to give you, clues about various places that you could enter stuff in the DNS in order to give you policy direction and so on. And it was a complete failure for lack of interest. So I'm a little concerned that we're having another BOF even while we're shutting down the working group that didn't deliver that the last time.
Hi, Jeff Hodges.
Okay, so need to go to the middle queue.
Actually, the guy at the back was waiting from the moment you asked.
Thank you.
So, okay, thank you, Ted. So all the way to the back.
Yes, thank you. I'm Davey from BI, and I want to offer an example of when I use Chinese because I'm from China. And now some input method in app or in computer that you can input directly with some traditional characters. So even some youngsters have the train to use the traditional word to have like a lifestyle to chat. That's the example happened in China. So I think it's a real problem, firstly, and I also think how to solve the problem. Do we prefer to solve the problem in the interpretation layer, I mean in the application layer, or in the domain system? So that happens to have the similar case is that the FC 43 tells us that the case insensitive. So I think it's a similarity between the variants of the character and the case insensitive things, because the case insensitive is well known for Western countries. So we can put this our common sense that domain name can insensitive for the case for the capital form. So and I just checked with my Chrome and I type the capital form of the google.com, and it's interpreted with without the capital form. So I need to just propose one example. I think this is a real problem, and we really need to think how we resolve from which layer. Yeah, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Ted?
Ted Hardy. So I'll first answer that question, because as it happens, this exact conversation happened at the Salt Lake City IETF at about almost exactly those words. James Seng, I think, was the discussant at that time, and as was pointed out to him at that point, and I'll point out again, the problem is in a lot of these, it's a one-way transform. So from Fantitze to Gentitze, you may have a mechanism that takes, for example, the fa in fajan and the fa in tofa and turns them into the same character, but you can't get it back out unless you have context, right? Because it's a one-way transform that doesn't tell you what the other direction is. And so it would be, to take your example, as if you could always go from uppercase to lowercase, but you could only sometimes go from lowercase back to uppercase. And that is a problem in a system which is fundamentally a known item lookup system that uses directed graphs, which is one way of describing the DNS. So when I read the description of this, and when I was writing the document that I wrote on this, I said, I can reduce your problem to a previously unsolved different problem. And that may help, and it may be completely pointless. What I'm trying to do in the draft I wrote is actually to recast this. Instead of saying, I want to make this in terms of DNS entries, I want to do this in terms of internet names. And the reality is that we actually have some internet names which are not currently in the DNS. The special use registry has .onion in it, which is now an internet name, which is not in the DNS. And the reason that's important is people want to use internet names in all of these other contexts like URIs, and HTTP, and email, and other things. And if you actually say, look, what I really want to do is to have an internet name that goes to an alternative resolution system that may have heuristic mechanisms that are not present in a known item lookup, you may have a better chance of resolving what you want to do. Now, the example that I put into the draft is very, very simplistic. It's color, C-O-L-O-U-R versus C-O-L-O-R, probably because internet drafts don't deal too well with either gentizia or fontizia. But I think we really have to kind of back up, and as Andrew was hinting, to take this back up a step and saying, are we actually asking for a characteristic of the internet naming system that's not currently provided by the DNS? And if that's true, then either we definitely have to take this requirement off, or we have to say to ourselves, maybe what we actually ought to be doing is enabling multiple different resolution systems for the internet naming system and providing a mechanism for interworking among them. Yeah, it's a much bigger scope than bundling, but it may be a scope that actually has a hope of working, where just bundling in the domain name system has failed multiple times.
Actually, Ted, before you go, I have a clarifying question. Richard's thing, which Andrew pointed out, was URI to domain name. Are you feeling that that is actually covered in your naming thing as well, or were you staying just within sort of one type of name?
So the difference I see in what was being proposed there is it treats portions of what in a URI would be outside of the authority structure.
Right.
What I described in this would be only for portions of it that would be inside
okay, thank you.
Inside the authority structure.
Right.
I have some prejudices that makes me feel like that if you tried to extend it any further, all of it would break.
Mm-hmm.
You probably could construct a mapping system that did that, but I believe it would have to be outside the naming system relevant to the authority structure, and would have to be done in a different part of the overall.
Okay, so you were staying essentially with what most people would call host name, between the first set of slashes and the next one.
Given that not all URIs use that, but yes.
Exactly right. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so thank you. I do want to just say a couple of words here. In general, we just want to hear from the community, and we're not going to reply to each comment that people make. But it is true that this problem space could be larger and actually a very broad scope than what we're really trying to achieve here. And I just want to sort of repeat that comment and state here what we're after. I mean, we're looking for the ability just to take two labels in the DNS and make them behave the same, so that a client can ask this question, it will always get the right answer, and regardless of which label it uses to make the query, it'll get the same answer as appropriate. And for those things that are at the table and understanding what's going on, they will also be able to see that these two labels behave the same. It'll be known that those two labels are intended to behave the same. And that's the goal that we're trying to achieve here. So in a sense, there's a little bit of signaling going on. Not the general problem. There are a lot of interesting problems in trying to make labels the same. And we're not after that and not trying to solve that problem. As has been said by a couple of people, Ted and Andrew, when he started too. I mean, there certainly is a larger architectural problem that we can have an interesting discussion about with respect to the DNS. But we're really focused on, we have the DNS, it's what's there, and we have a particular problem. And the goal here is to try and talk about that problem space and either agree or not that we can scope that problem to something that we believe we can create a solution for. So a limited number of labels that we want to be able to behave the same within the DNS protocol. And that's really what we're looking for here. So back to the microphones. And I now see Mark in the queue up here too, but I'll put Mark behind the people that I see in the queue right now. So please, right here.
Hi, Jeff Hodges. So I just wanted to second Andrew's comments. The working group he mentioned was debound, just for the record. The work that Andrew and I did there would arguably solve this at a higher level. It's the more broad problem. This is a subcase of it. From an operational and DNS guts point of view, I don't know how it would necessarily work to do the brute force, this label equals that label. Good luck. But again, it seems kind of odd that we're shutting down debound and then sitting here discussing a subset of the overall problem space.
Thank you. Yone-san?
Yoshiro Yone. So my thoughts about this problem is to have at least two aspects. One is zone management to solve zone management complexity, and the other is user accessibility. The latter is much broader scope. So here is IETF. So I think to make more clear which scope we are going to solve.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to the remote queue here. So Mark, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm back. A fair bit of this is the fact that C names have been totally ignored by the applications when you do a lookup in the DNS. Most applications just ignore the fact that there is a C name. Mail originally did a rewrite and would have given the semantics we're looking for now with these bundle names where the SMTP name is rewritten based on the presence of a C name. Unfortunately, for HTTP, we don't do that, but that itself is a reasonably easy fix in terms of creating a record similar to MX or getting SRV through the system, which actually points at a server. That's a fair bit of this problem is the applications just ignore the fact that we do a redirection on the DNS, and this will need application support. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Front, Stefan.
Stefan Nortmeyer. I would like to go back to the first requirement of the list, do not change the DNS protocol, because when you presented it, you said must not change the DNS protocol and no modification to the infrastructure. But this is too fuzzy, because if we add a new error type with additional processing requirement, then we don't change the protocol, but we have to change software, the infrastructure, at least to avoid interoperability problems. So I would like to know if must not change the DNS protocol should be taken as should work with unmodified name server, which is very strict as a requirement, because, for instance, it rules out bname or thing like that. So maybe this first requirement would need to be more detailed in what we expect and do not expect and do not accept.
So fair enough. To expand a bit on, must not change the DNS protocol. The intent here is that we want backward compatibility. So the idea is the installed base of servers and resolvers would continue to work. It's possible if we added an RR type that the assumption is that the installed base would be able to ignore that if they didn't understand it and didn't use it. But the goal here is that an authoritative server, if we added anything like a new RR type, it obviously would have to understand that and it would have to work with it and use it. So there would be a change in that particular case. But for other servers or other resolvers of various types, stub resolvers, forwarding resolvers, if they didn't understand the new RR type, that would be okay. And things would still work. You'd be able to ask a query, you would get a response, and everything would work as it did before. It's just that if you knew, so there's a signaling mechanism that we're also looking for here. If you knew that these two labels or more than one label were behaving the same, that you would get the same answer when you query for either one of these labels, you might want to take advantage of that and do something with that information. Okay, so thank you. Back to the microphone.
Yeah, well, we want again from ZDNS. I just talked with my colleagues back in office. They did a quick analysis in our database. Cause the platform, our platform support about 22 new GTLDs, and according to their reply, that about 40% of our customers have more than one domain names with the same labels under different TLDs. That will be they're pretty interested in this idea, but the only the worries from them is about the DNSSEC. So they're not, though we haven't make a deep discussion about that. But if it's DNSSEC must be supported, or yes, that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Ed Lewis. So I have some questions about where we're going with this. And so let me start with this morning. I told someone I was coming to this BOF, and he goes, "Oh, is that registry thing over there?" And my reaction was, "Well, I don't really think it's necessarily about registry. I think it's a little bit more general." And then, Jim, you said something a little while ago. You said you want to have two domain names behave the same way. I'm paraphrasing what you said a little while ago, which is what I thought was a good problem statement for the D-bound group. It's a little bit different from what they were chasing down, but the idea, if I have these two names and I have a name that behaves a certain way, and I see this one, how can I make them act the same? I think it's a bit more general than just a registry thing. Like registry is like bundling name, like the bundled name, it kind of implies variance and all this kind of stuff. And so I was trying to just juggle in my mind what it is that you're after here. And then the last statement, not the last, something you said more recently was that you're looking at something more short term than re-architecting the whole namespace issue. So it made me think, well, what do you want to do in the short term? I mean, that is, what's the short term angle of this? Is it to just hack, so to speak, into the DNS to do something where these two names can declare that they are equivalent, or the set of names are equivalent? And for what's the driving purpose? Is it actually a time together within a registry, because it could be within only one zone? Or do you want something that's general purpose where I could declare my names and all these other operators, they're all mutually tied together? So I'm kind of, that's kind of what I want to see clarified in terms of where we're going with this right now.
Okay. I'll let the queue wind down and then we'll say a little more.
Peter Koch-Dienig. I have a similar clarifying question that was brought forward by Ed. So I heard you say, Jim, that you want the domain names to behave the same in the DNS, which could be read as resolve to the same result. During the presentation of the use cases and problem statements, we heard from John and Richard that this kind of behavior was more leaned towards user experience, as in I want to type in these domain names and get the same website, which would involve other systems to react to this in terms of the web server being in the know that it has to serve a certain domain name, excuse me, mail service being able and willing to accept or forward mails to a certain domain, certificates being present, and so on and so forth. So would you consider the latter part out of scope for this endeavor and be handled elsewhere, manually or automatically, or should it be solved all at the same time?
Okay, we'll let Paul speak and then I'll try to say some words about what we've heard here before Suzanne.
So first bullet, yes, it is a problem, although there's more than one it. So yes, they are a problem. And do I think the problem is clear? Absolutely not. And I think Peter's last comment is a perfect example of that, whereas what people, and it's not just you, Jim, other people have said, want it to act like it, where some of it is in the DNS, some of it is in the servers of applications, assuming all applications are client servers, and some of them are in the client of applications. So I don't think it's clear. I think as we clarify it, we're going to get much closer to saying, oh God, no, this is impossible. And for various reasons, particularly because if just with those three different problems, I cannot imagine a solution that would work across those. I mean, maybe I'm just not being creative enough, but I think that the problem being clear, the problem is very clear to individuals in the room, and their problems do not map to each other's very well.
Okay, so thank you for that. Maybe I will let, since Suzanne is the last person in the mic, we'll let Suzanne speak and then try and summarize a little bit of where we are and what we're trying to achieve here. But so thank you, Suzanne, go ahead.
Sure, just to sort of amplify on Paul's point particularly. Yeah, I don't think there is a single problem here. I think there's a bunch of problems that are sort of interrelated, and where several people have mentioned previous efforts to tackle some of these use cases, and they have been the same use cases. The question is, how are the use cases really related? And I think it's largely turns out to be very superficial. There are almost no, and where these previous efforts that people have referred to before have sort of foundered and people have given up and gone home, is that it turns out to be extremely difficult to come up with a problem statement or even a set of related problem statements such that people will know when they've solved a problem to the satisfaction of the people that have it. So I don't think, I'm going to be even more pessimistic than Paul just was and say, I don't think there is a clear problem or even a clearly identifiable bundle of problems here. And I got to say, saying that this is, I don't want to go back, I don't like going back to the same point, but I will, that previous efforts have foundered. People have literally given up on this. And what I would like to hear from this effort is, it's okay to say all those previous times people gave up for the, you guys were wrong to give up on this. I mean, I'm wrong a lot. I'm good at it. But it would be nice to see if there's something new here that would justify reopening issues that people have actually looked at a number of times in the past. The other thing is, I had one quick point on context. You ask on the next slide, sorry, there's a requirement on the next slide that the names, that bundled names must be in the same context. I think that's the easy part. The hard part is finding a way to establish that context and signal it to agents not in it, so that other agents know to resolve those names in that context that they share.
Okay, thank you. Let me try and say something about some of the things that I've heard here. I mean, obviously, what we're looking for is try and create a clear problem statement, and so that folks can believe that there's a solution here that might be forthcoming. So I'm looking at my co-chair for those who are remote and listening. I'll try and say some words, but feel free to jump in here if I don't get this quite right. Let's make sure that we agree on where we're trying to go here. I understand, and we do fully understand that the general problem is actually quite broad and has had a lot of discussion here in the IETF. And so we really are trying to find a way to make a clear problem statement that is something that we can solve. So the statement that we've been using is 2 DNS labels that behave the same and are substitutable. So let me try and expand a little bit on what some of that means based on what I've heard here in terms of the discussion, and see if this gets us any closer to a problem statement. Behaving the same, the intent here is that regardless of the label that you use, you can make a query and you will always get back, essentially an equivalent answer. So you'll get back the same result. So the response will always be the same, regardless of which label you use to ask your question. I'm being careful not to say, I want to use the term substitutable. We've had that explained to us multiple times, trying to stay out of this notion of equivalence, because that has too much baggage that goes with it. So again, substitutable labels that will, when I make a query, I will get the response that I get back will be the same, regardless of which label that I use to make the query. The important part of this also is a signaling mechanism. And the idea here in not changing the protocol or backward compatible is that things will work in the existing infrastructure, okay? But for those applications, for example, web servers is sort of the example that we use for ourselves internally when talking about this. I mean, you can imagine a situation where a web server, obviously it has configuration options for recognizing for itself that it is serving the same that certain labels are equivalent, and so it will offer a similar reply. You can have alias mechanisms inside the web server, but in fact, what you want here out of this is the ability to query the DNS and not only get the same response, and so you're always going to be pointed at the same place, but you have the ability to be told that yes, these things really are the same. And you can imagine it might be able to configure itself automatically, because now it can look and say, oh, gee, you know, I've been configured to understand this name, but now I know that these names are all the same, right? To get to, you know, Rich's presentation about user context, that is it's not a problem that we want to solve per se. We're not looking to solve the user experience, but you can imagine that if you had a mechanism and I had an application, if an application or a service could ask and could recognize that these labels are intended to be the same, then it might do interesting things with that information, right? And that's the goal that we're trying to achieve. So you have the benefit of being able to enhance or, you know, innovate, do interesting things with your user experience, given that you know that these labels are intended to be similar or intended to behave the same and give you the same result, okay? Yeah. So anything you want to add to that before we go back to the mic? Now I've prompted a number of people to come to the mic.
Yeah,
so
okay, yeah, I have the similar comments with Jim, and the roughly the problem could be very broad, and this time we just want to focus on the DNS layer, and we do notice that there are a bunch of domain names belongs to one registrant, and the registrant have the similar purpose to use this kind of domain names, and so by now the DNS protocol is lacking of automatically tool to help the registrant to the users to set up this kind of backpack of the domain names to behave at the same purpose. That's our clear problem want to solve here today. Yeah.
okay, so we'll go back and forth between the two mics and take a bunch of people. So John up here in front first.
Yeah, John Levine, I think. You need to jump in front of me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So Shane's a note taker.
I'm gonna jump in because I was taking minutes and had to step out of line. So actually, I wanted to ask something unrelated to this, which is that are there people in other spaces like application developers or people working in protocols outside of the IETF that are coming up with solutions which we may find distasteful because it does violate some of our implicit or explicit constraints? Is there a danger that if we don't do anything, we're going to end up with a hodgepodge of crappy or solutions which we don't like because we care very much about aesthetics and other people don't?
I think the word you're looking for is Facebook.
I wasn't looking for the word Facebook, but that's probably a good example. Yeah.
I think the only comment that I want to make in response to that is, I mean, today what you get in order to get substitutable labels is you have to manually configure things. So you have no way within the system, you know, to get the same behavior with different labels. So you have to create your zones, and you have to have zones and make sure they all have the same information in them.
Well, so depends on what you mean by manual. If I'm a big mega corporation and control the entire user experience, for the user, there's no configuration. They go to my application or maybe my partner's application, and it's all magic for them. Now, from your point of view as a registry, they may be doing scary, transparent stuff that you have no insight into, and the user may have no idea what's really going on under the hood. But yeah,
that solution is a silo, right? So what's missing there is the signaling mechanism that lets other people do things with substitutable labels. Okay, and I'm sorry. So let's go to the back first, David.
Yeah, clearly this is a major problem. I think part of the challenge that we're facing is we keep casting it in terms of a DNS problem. I actually think it's not a DNS problem. The issue is actually that we're trying to remap the entire namespace in ways that the DNS doesn't fundamentally support. And as a result, we get into all sorts of pretzel shapes simply because this is a problem that's far, far outside the DNS. In order to address this problem, we have to deal with the application and presentation layer issues, and the DNS can't help you there. You know, the DNS is one mechanism by which you deal with a translation of a particular subset of the namespace into a different set of values. This is way beyond that, and it is a huge problem, and it has to be solved one way or another. But looking at it through the very narrow keyhole of the DNS is, I mean, I think we've demonstrated multiple times now a waste of time.
So I want to add a comment here too, and I should have said this before when I was responding. I absolutely agree with what David said and other folks here along the way. The problem is I don't know what other lens to look through when trying to solve this problem. The DNS is the identifier infrastructure that we have in the internet today. So I'm not looking to create a new kind of system, right? We're not looking for a new system. The DNS is what we have, and we have a problem, and we need the solution. We need something in the DNS space to solve this problem, and that's why we're looking at this problem through that lens. So anyway, please, John.
Yeah, John Levine. I think Andrew said in the chat room, which I think, if we were better at writing and provisioning, if we were better at writing provisioning software, we wouldn't think this was a problem. I mean, like for me, .ong and .ngo, making them the same was easy because I adjusted my scripts to put the same stuff in the zone files. You know, and there are like the combinational explosion I showed on one of my slides might be hard to address, but other than that, you know, like if we could write provisioning software that could actually put stuff in the same zones, then we'd be, you know, the DNS side of our problem would be done, and then we could go off and figure out how to write better provisioning software for our applications. So I'm thinking that given that we've gone around and around and around with this for years with no closure at all, I'm seeing that the problem really is not just can we come up with something that's big enough to be interesting and small enough to solve, but can we come up with something that all the people who have so far failed to implement even the half-hearted solutions that already exist would implement. So my inclination is to tell people, rather than trying to define something new, people should go do experiments. You know, maybe it needs an RG, maybe people can just do stuff. I mean, like, I think the clone looks promising, but I don't really know whether it would actually work given the provisioning problems that people run into when they do real stuff. You know, so I would really like to go off and like implement clone and do it in some subtrees, and you know, and try patching my web server and seeing if I can actually make it work, you know, and if I came back and said, well, here's what I implemented and here's what actually worked and then here's what actually didn't work, I think that would be much more likely to get us towards a conclusion, than yet another round of can we do something like bname that will magically that will magically solve the problem for people who can't get the provisioning right.
So thank you. I'm being conscious of the time here, and we also have the remote queue. So I want to move to John in the remote queue. So please, John, go ahead, and just everybody to recognize that we only have 7 or 8 minutes left here.
Yeah, I'm troubled by this because most of the use cases I know of, including many of those which were illustrated earlier, have the property that when you get down to actually talking about what the users are going to do with it, this is not a requirement about turning one label into another label or making a pair of labels match. It's a problem about making fully qualified domain names match, where each of the levels of labels in those FQDNs may have different names one wants to match it to, or different pairings, even if you can keep that binary pairing. The original conception for Chinese names with the JET proposal was easy because we assumed that a tree would be either all simplified names or all traditional names, and you'd only need a single branch point. But again, we're not talking about the right mechanisms of doing that either. So I'm wondering, is in the first instance, if we solve the problem which is being described here, especially in terms of bundling a pair of labels or a set of labels, whether that actually solves the problem which people are interested in, or whether we're going to end up with a different set of complexities down the road and the same kinds of problems we ran into with IDNs and the DNS, in which the claim was that if only we could get them at the second level or below, everybody would be happy. And then it turned out we needed to the top level as well. And it's that exact problem with the fact that this really is a hierarchy that I'm a little concerned about when I hear these discussions. The other thing I want to mention is that there was a large effort circa 2002 to try to look at an alternative to this set of problems in terms of an environment which would sit on top of the DNS and be called by applications which wanted to use it, which would provide much more flexibility in matching of names which might have spelling variations or other orthographic issues or IDN issues, even if the matching and lookup there involved dictionary lookups, which we certainly can't do with the DNS. And that effort fizzled out because of something which is very similar to something which was said earlier, which is people decided they wanted to do it in the DNS. And what we've been trying to do ever since is make the DNS do a bunch of things it was never designed to do and probably cannot be converted to do except by going in bizarre directions. So I would suggest that as people go down this path, that they also try to be aware of that earlier work and where it would lead if anybody decided they wanted to reopen those questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, John. To the mic in the back.
Jim Reed, I wonder here if we're trying to look for the impossible and trying to find a solution for something that probably just doesn't exist. I think this problem is potentially too complicated. And maybe the comment that David made before is really that we're trying to solve something in DNS that really is an application level thing. And really what we're going to try, if we take this on as any kind of work item, the IETF will probably repeat the same mistakes and have the same problems we've had at the previous attempts to try and deal with this particular problem. And maybe we need to back up and sort of start again from scratch. And from that sense, I'm saying, just to throw something out there, is perhaps using Unicode rather than ASCII as the basis of domain name labels.
Okay, thank you. In front here, Rich.
Hi, Rich Merdinger, GoDaddy. I wanted to make a point that as we've looked to try to accomplish some of this, what we call domain bundling, virtually everything we want to accomplish can be handled through orchestration at the registrar and service provider level. We're not necessarily saying that we need to tear down and rebuild the world here. As we got together in the DNS bundling barb-off, there was a very narrow solution being recommended or problem statement being put forward. And all I was trying to do is say, hey, if we expand this a little bit, could we facilitate an evolution in the way that resolution and presentation of content occurs over time? Yes, definitely involving other working groups and other application areas so that it can complementarily do it. The intent is not to slow it down and make this a huge problem. It's just, let's solve this one within the context of maybe what we can achieve more broadly. Thank you.
Thank you. In the back.
David from BI. And I want to add in something. I partially agree with David about it's not the DNS problem in the protocol issues. But I just partially because when I heard that saying, it seems that, well, it's not our problem, it's your problem. You were solved by yourself. So I just want to mention it's a real problem and suffering for the people who use the variants, who use the Chinese traditional words. And I also want to compare with the situation in IDN, and I think it's a way to introduce the some kind of mapping of code to help the people use this the name, so that people can easily use their favorite language to access the database. Right. That's what I want to say. Yeah. Don't leave the problem away.
Okay, thank you. I do want to close the mic queues at this point, and we'll just run down the list of people here. So continuing from the back.
Alex Mayo for Nicto.IT. I think we have been through similar discussions quite a few times. So especially looking at that the DNS side of it only solves like a minor part of the problem. Actually, that part that the user is not really interested in. Yeah, but the main complexity is in all the applications that are out there. Yeah, if you want to behave a name in the same way, it's not just about the behavior on the DNS. It's essentially about the behavior on the app side. So I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that without revamping the whole thing that we have, we can never achieve a 100% solution. And therefore, I really like what John has said before, that let's try and do experiments. Yeah, clone looks promising. I agree to that. But I would say that we maybe need to think about something that's just more like a hint rather than an absolute, let me put it that way, an absolute 100% way to achieve what we want to have. We should maybe look at things that actually hint to whatever part of the infrastructure that these two names are the same, rather than trying to go for the 100% across all applications and whatever is out there.
Okay, thank you. To the mic in the middle.
My name is Jian Kang Yao. I think this. I agree. Most of say this problem is very complex. I agree. But I think, for example, if you in your city from your city to Seoul, maybe no direct flight. But someone transfer at some other cities. So I think there's a 2 steps or 3 steps solution. But we should do first step. Maybe I think it should done something in DNS layer. Then go to in DNS layer is ready. Then we go to something application layer. Thank you.
Thank you. And Warren, you get the last word at the mic, and we're.
Yep, I'll go first. Can you quickly flip to requirements? So I've been standing up and sitting down because I didn't want to appear stupid, but apparently other people don't get this too. What exactly do you mean by all names in a bundle must be in the same context? Which way are you using the word context?
In this case, we're trying to say that there's no additional information other than it's a DNS name. Okay, so or another way to look at this is we're not trying to say that if you have 2 labels that are substitutable, one of them is not better than the other. There's no primary and no secondary. So that's really what's behind that statement. I think the right answer here is, at the moment, is we're still talking about what the problem statement is and trying to understand what problem we're trying to solve. And I think the right thing to do here at this point, and I'm looking around for our ADs and just see if they're going to nod their head, is that we have to continue this discussion of what the problem statement is. We do have a mailing list. There is a DNS bundled mailing list. And I think I would like to encourage people, if you're not already subscribed, to please join that list and be part of that discussion. And I think the answer for us is to take the action to try to summarize and create some words that describe the problem statement and use that to motivate discussion on the mailing list. So we'll start a thread here shortly, giving people a chance to take some time to go join the mailing list. It's an IETF list, usual IETF mechanisms for doing that. And we'll try to create a problem statement in words and continue the discussion there as to whether or not we have scoped a problem that people agree is a solvable problem. I mean, there's obviously interest in this, and there are some of us who would really like to see a solution of this type. But I think we're going to need to take it to list so that we can agree that the DNS is the right place to try and create a solution that can be usable in other places. And one last comment.
Just a clarification, Jim. Will the slides and minutes or the records of the session be published on the IETF website?
They should be. All the slides are actually online in the meeting materials area.
Okay.
They are all posted. Yes. So, okay. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, where are the blue sheets?
Here.
Got them both? Yeah, there are 2. Where's the other blue?